This is the Big Fish Cares Podcast. Big Fish Cares Podcast. And here's your host, Benny Fisher.
Welcome to the Big Fish Cares Podcast. This is your host, Benny Fisher, and I am really excited about today's guest because not only is he a good colleague in business, but he's also a really dear friend of mine. Joe Rosen, welcome to the show.
How you doing, my man?
This is fun. This is my first virtual podcast. I've been a little old school and only had people in the studio. We got this new software today.
That's good. I'm glad I'm getting you out of your cocoon.
Well, I mean, I got tons of friends all over the country, and you're like my best friend that's in Florida, which I'm a little envious about because, you know, it's the weather down there. Every time you make a post or a video, it's always, the sun's always shining.
You're always invited, man. It's beautiful.
Tell us, I'm gonna give the guests at home a little bit of a brief intro on how we met. So me and Joe were both passionate about sports cards, which a lot of you folks listening are probably like, what, a bunch of 40-year-old men still trading baseball cards? Yes, that's exactly what we do. And we met in the Facebook groups probably, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And, you know, doing a little bit of buying and selling, seeing each other's names. And Joe then, because I'm friends with him on Facebook through sports cards, then I obviously follow his personal feed. And I knew he was in the military. He was in the Army, right, Joe? And I kept seeing, he's like, I'm retiring from the Army, and I'm going to set out on this journey where I'm going to get back into real estate, and I'm going to pick my destination. He plotted it all out. He documented the whole process. And I'm watching this guy every day be consistent on Facebook, telling everybody exactly what he was going to do, and then watching him exactly do it. And it at least appears, and we'll find out later, that it's just all happening and it's all working, and like everything he says he does. And that's how I met Joe Rosen. And then I saw his leadership abilities, I saw his consistency, and I said, you know what? My people need to hear Joe Rosen because, you know, my people sometimes, you know, I fall on deaf ears sometimes, and Joe's got a different perspective. And I'm like, Joe, will you come up to Pittsburgh? I know it's not, you know, not as nice as sunny Florida, but will you come up to Pittsburgh and talk to my people about, you know, life and priorities and time management and leadership and all those good qualities. So give me a little bit of your background. Tell me how you got started. Where were you born? How were you raised? Tell me a little bit about your family life growing up, and we're going to take you on a little Joe Rosen story.
Yeah, man. Well, I'll tell you why I'm probably attracted to Florida is because I'm from Princeton, Minnesota, man. It's right in the heart of Minnesota. It's colder than hell, and it's a small town. It's probably 4,000 people. I was obsessed with football. I was a football captain, and that was just, you know, my whole life. It seems like I go from obsession to obsession. And so it was football. And then I got out of that, went to college in St. Cloud State in Minnesota, and just completely bombed. I think my GPA was a 1.6, and I think I made it 2.5, 3 years, ran out of money, and I only had 70-some credits out of 120. So I was looking pretty bad. So I got into real estate, and, you know, when I was going to get into real estate, I had told everybody, listen, I'm going down to Cancun, and I'm going to start a new party guide business where, you know, women will come down and they'll ask me to be their party guide on their bachelorette parties, and I'm going to bring them to the best clubs and have the best time and whatever. And in all honesty, looking back, I probably would have failed my butt off. But I think I was honestly just running from my problems, you know. And my friend Tara Stetner said, Joe, I'm in real estate. I'd like you to try real estate. Just give it 6 months. If you like it, great. If you don't, get out and go to Cancun or whatever crazy idea you got. I said, all right, cool, let's do it. So I got into real estate, and it took off. We had a great year together. We ended up going our separate ways after the first year and doing different things. She still is the administrative leader of a different real estate company up in St. Cloud. And I believe I stuck with it until 2009. And, you know, I was making money, and I was in my 20s. But it didn't matter what I was making. I was spending a little bit more, and it was on all the wrong things. And I knew it, man. I at least had the benefit of being aware. So that awareness of the trouble I was getting into and the fact that it didn't matter what I was making, I was going to spend more, really attracted me to the Army. And so I shouldn't say the Army, the military. So I went around and talked to some different folks. I talked to all the branches.
Hold on one second. I got questions. Yeah. Because how old were you when you decided to go in the military?
27.
And I'm going to guess that's pretty uncommon.
We had a platoon of 50, and I was the third oldest.
You're like the old guy.
Dude, we had a guy, he was my battle buddy. He was this angry 40-year-old black man, and he was a great soldier. But the kids drove him nuts. I'm 40 right now, so it makes me think, like, getting in right now, I'd be going nuts too. That poor guy, I had to pull him back from more fights.
Do they have age limits? Like, when you, like, what's the oldest you can be to say, hey, sign me up, I want to go to war?
It changes depending upon the needs of the Army. But from memory, when we got in, 40 was the limit. He was right at the limit. I think that decreased while I was in because the recession created a need for people to come in. And that recession lasted till, maybe 15, 16. I can't remember. So, now I don't know what it's at, but it's probably in the mid to upper 30s, I'm guessing.
Cool. So you said two things that, you were running away from your problems. You were also aware. Tell me about how you think you, at a young age, like, 'cause I'm thinking back into my 20s, what skill set did you have that you were actually aware? Like, did your parents, like, were they helping you make you aware? Like what, who's driving the awareness, or was it just you?
Yeah. As a kid, I grew up with my mom until I was 12. And she was either a single mom, or when she got married, I believe I was maybe, 7, 8, 9 years old, something like that. And I still lived with her till I was 12. I had very little oversight. I mean, I remember getting home from kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and nobody be home. My mom would be at work, and I would, you get off the bus at 3, 4 o'clock. I'd make a Totino's pizza. I'd watch the Cosby Show. I'd play with my baseball cards, and I'd put myself to bed. And I saw my mom on the weekends, and I was 5, 6, 7 years old. When she got married, I tell this story all the time because as a father now, looking back, it's the one that I think is maybe the most... We did crazier things, but this is the one that our parents blessed off on. I was 9 and my brothers were, I think, 11 and 12, or maybe it was 9, 10, and 12. And we lived on the Rum River, which is close to the Mississippi River. And they would drive us into town with a rowboat, and the three of us brothers would get in the rowboat, and we would have food and a tent and sleeping bags and whatever, and we'd hide some alcohol in there. And then we'd go down the river, and the river had a current, man.
Wait, at 9, 10, and 12, you guys were already drinking? That's impressive. No, that's all right. Listen, I'm finding this. I'm interested. I'm totally interested in that. That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's cool.
No, we had 400 acres on the river, and we had a hunting preserve, and they also owned a bar. So these are two kids in their 30s and 40s who own two big businesses they got to keep up with. And the brothers, I mean, we were self-sufficient. We were happy. We had guns and things to shoot at, and we had trucks we could drive as long as we were on our property. And, we made money working at the hunting preserve. So at any given time, you could come up to my 9-year-old self, and I'd have $100, $200 on me. And we gambled a lot because of that. So
like
we got
played on cards or dice or like anything? You probably bet on anything.
Yeah,
bet on
all
anything,
of it.
Right?
You name it, we played it, man. My favorite game was In Between.
Ace-a-deucey?
And
like,
is that what it is? Where you get two cards
in between, but if it's the same card, like you got to put all the money back in the pot and like you lose. Yeah, it's Ace-a-deucey, baby.
And you put a quarter each in, and you're like, well, this isn't a big deal. But if you play for an hour, it's over 100.
The pot just builds, man. It's like, and when you're like in between, like it's like a 10 and a 2, and you're like, yeah, and then all of a sudden, like a jack comes, you're like, or when you have like a 2 king, and the king or a 2 comes, right? Because ties are no good, right?
Tie is double.
You gotta pay double, right?
Yeah, so if it's a 210 and I bet, let's say $20 and it comes up a jack, I got to put in $20. If it's a 10, I got to put in
that's
40.
right. Yeah, that's what I mean. So like when you have the max, right, 2 to king or 2 to ace, right? Like you're like, oh, I can't lose, and then bam.
You're
That's
not
the
kidding.
worst. People don't gamble. Kids at home that are listening, don't gamble. It's not good for you. Yeah.
Don't gamble.
So you had an interesting childhood, I would say. I feel like everyone's has an interesting childhood. If you like, at the end of the day, like everyone's got their own unique story, and I feel like part of that is what makes the person on the other side, right? Is the things that they are running from, the things that they're chasing, going towards. And I remember one of the things that you told me, and I think you were in Pittsburgh. You were telling me about the hell why and the heaven why, and that theme has stuck with me. That's why I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit about, your journey. And then you went to college, then you went to real estate. Now you're in the military. So let's go to the military. Let's get back to the military. Tell me what that was like, man. At 27 years old, first of all, did like everybody think you were nuts, or did everybody think that was like the coolest thing ever? Like how
I don't know
you
what
didn't
they
care.
thought. I honestly
You
don't
needed
know.
it that bad. You didn't care.
I didn't really care, and I was 27. I mean, I was a grown man at that time. My parents were not overly excited about it. But
Because there's that fear,
I didn't
mentality.
really care.
Their little baby's gonna get hurt, right? Like it's like it's
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's all it was.
So what was it like? What's basic training like, man? Like I'm not no one's ever gonna mistake me for like a big macho military guy. So
It's literally what you would expect. And I'll tell you, you've got every walk of life in there. You've got people with really weak mindsets, people with strong mindsets. You've got strong women, weak men. You've got tall, short, you name it.
you got no
you
fat
got
guy.
it.
You got no fat guys in there. I can tell you that.
No, you've
What?
got plenty
I thought
fat guys.
You don't,
You've got
you don't have to pass a
yeah.
test to get in or anything.
You do, but they fudge it, man. The recruiters got to get their numbers. So they will take a fat guy and they'll say, by the time you hit MEPS, you need to be a certain weight. Well, the guys at MEPS, they got to hit their numbers. So as long as they see you're making progression, they'll let you
Tell me what
into it.
MEPS is for all of us non-military people.
MEPS is the place you go to sign your final contract.
What's it stand for?
Gone.
Is it an acronym?
Yes, and I have no
All right,
idea.
so even
I
the
don't know
guys
what
in the
MEPS
military
stands
don't know
for.
what MEPS is. They just know where it is. They just know.
No, I have no idea.
Well, that's why.
Dude, you know how many of those acronyms are
Well,
on?
that's
I
what
don't
I'm
know what the
saying.
hell
I'm
I'm
thinking
talking
like
about.
I'm like listeners at home, if they have no military or they don't like really follow it, I'm like, what's a MEP? Like, I think I know what you're talking about only because
You just got your first taste of the Army.
I've watched
yeah,
enough
welcome.
movies. You know what I mean? Like, I've watched what's that movie with Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson? A Few Good Men. Like, I feel.
It's not like that at all.
But whatever.
No.
So basic training goes through. You obviously probably passed, right? We wouldn't be talking about this awesome military.
Basics
right?
easy.
Basics easy.
Yes.
So what were the lessons in basic training? What did you want to do outside of basic training? Do they give you choices? Tell me a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, I mean, basic training is a piece of cake. It sucks. The suck factor is really high. You're tired. You're eating 3 meals a day if you're lucky, and some of them are boxed meals made by the Army. They're disgusting. You're always rucking or running or dirty or sweaty, or they give you a task that takes 10 minutes and you get 5 minutes to do it, which is on purpose. They want to see how do you handle stress when you know you're going to fail. So you just get used to almost not caring, right? Like, I know I'm going to fail, but I'm just going to go work hard anyway. And when I get yelled at, I don't care. And that's what they want. They want to toughen you up. They want you to figure out how to listen to them. You make the decision before you go to basic training as to what your job is going to be. So you have to take a test called the ASVAB
Yeah, what's
test.
that stand for?
I don't know what that stands for either, man. But you get a score. You get 2 scores. One is out of either 99 or 100. I don't know. And the other one is a GT score. It's a general technical. I don't know what it's out of, but it goes up. I mean, I've seen them in the 140s. I would say an average person is probably in the 90s to 110s. I think you've got to have a 110 to be an officer.
So it's kind of like, it's almost
pretty
kind
much
of like, that to me sounds like the IQ score. Like 100 is your average IQ score of anyone. And then, like your geniuses are like over like 130. Your super geniuses are like 150, like Albert Einstein. And then like for someone
That's
like
accurate.
that like maybe has some disabilities or learning disabilities, like they're like around 70, 80, I think, so it sounds like it's kind of similar along that line. So you took the test before you went in, correct?
Yeah, you got to take the test because that opens up what job
So what'd you score?
opportunities you've got in front of you. Well, I got a
All right.
99, and my GT, I think I don't remember, was a 139. But I saw three soldiers who had. You got to remember, I was an intel. There were three soldiers who had better GTs than I did, and the one who was the highest was not a super nerd. We had a lot of super nerds. He was a worker. He was a lot like I was, man. He was just a very logical dude. He hated the army, but he was the hardest worker I had. He wanted to know how, like, tell me exactly what I need to do, and if I get it done by this time, can I go home early? Yeah, I don't care what you do, man. Work your butt off and get it done.
Was he a country boy?
He was phenomenal. I don't think
okay.
so.
Just curious.
I've seen
just
him
curious
since.
if there's a correlation
and
between country boys versus city boys. Like, I don't know.
No, I don't know. I will say country boys
Right.
work harder. You've been beat your whole lives. It does, like, it's
Yeah.
not a big deal to you. Whatever.
So what kind of?
But yeah, you know what you're gonna do before you go to basic
So you
training.
wanted to be in like Intel?
Well, I went in wanting to build the best resume possible for when I got out.
Did you know what you wanted to do when you got out?
No, I didn't.
But you wanted to build a
So
you wanted to
this
build
is
a
how-
resume though. So you wanted to get a corporate job.
I didn't know what I wanted to do, but so I kind of narrowed it down to 6 jobs, but there were only 2 available of my 6. One was, and it was my number 6 option. It was air traffic controller, and the reason that was attractive was because I knew getting out it was high demand and it's a ton of money. So I thought, okay, this
What's
gives
a ton
me
of what's a ton
a
of
lot
money?
of options. I don't remember, maybe
Well,
150
that's a ton of
to
money.
200.
That's a
For
ton of
the
money back then.
Yeah, for anybody going into the
That's a ton of
military,
money
yeah,
back-
that's
it's a ton of money right now. Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So it was a strong job with strong job opportunities. And then my number 1 option was available, and that was a linguist, right? A cryptologic linguist. So it's a little bit of breaking code or, kind of putting the story together and creating reports for others. And it's also learning a language and being able to translate that language. So, but you don't know if you're in the Army at that time, you didn't know what language you were going to get. And there's different categories
so
of
weird.
languages.
So you gotta
right?
pick. You gotta pick the job, but like then it's like a raffle, and they're like, oh, you can speak Spanish, you could speak Chinese, you could speak, I don't know, what do they speak? I'm assuming most of this stuff back then. That was when we were in Afghanistan,
The
and
big
like
ones-
Middle East, right?
Yeah, the big ones were Russian, Chinese, and Arabic.
Russian, Chinese, and Arabic. And I think I know the answer to this because I love you and I pay attention. You didn't pick, but you got selected to speak Arabic.
I got selected to speak Arabic, yeah. And my mind was thinking, I want Chinese. Because I'm thinking if I get out and I'm going to do business, that's who I'm going to do business with. But in all honesty, Chinese are educated and they know English and they know Chinese. So your competition is way higher. I spoke Arabic. There are not a lot of Arab, at least compared to Chinese, of Arab business people. So the job opportunities with the Arabic language were actually
Right. You
much
could go to
better.
Dubai, man, and like be in the top of one of those penthouses doing some big real estate deal in Arabic, baby.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how long did it take you to learn Arabic? I mean, because like that's just like symbols, right? Is it kind of like Chinese? Like it's like symbols and like can't. It's not like Spanish. Spanish at least has the same alphabet, right? Like these languages over there, like, got to be a lot tougher.
Okay, so Spanish has the same letters but different words. In Chinese and Japanese, it's actual symbols that will mean an entire word. In Arabic, it's just a different alphabet. So you wouldn't be able to understand what it is, but it's not symbols, it's actual letters that make up
Interesting.
words.
See, now how's Arabic compared to like Hebrew and like those other languages that are similar over there? And maybe they're not similar. That's just probably me being stupid about it.
No, they're not. They're not similar in language. Like English and Spanish are similar in that if you know the word school and you hear escuela, you can probably guess that means
right.
school.
Yeah, you always have to add a vowel. You just always add a vowel to anything in English, and you can make it Spanglish.
Exactly. Yeah. Hebrew and Arabic and Chinese are all completely different. They do have words that are called cognates. A cognate is a word that, even in that language, they'll say the same thing as English. So you'll be saying a sentence that's, you don't understand any of it, and all of a sudden they'll say, Urida netheb ila el sukli Pepsi.
Oh.
And you're like, oh, I know that one.
Yeah, give me a drink.
It's like, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. That's gotta be that's so interesting. How long did it take you to like I mean, I don't know, I guess you never master a language when it's your second language, but like how long did it take you to become competent?
You get 63 weeks to pass, and it depends on the category of the language. This was a Cat, I can't even remember now, I think it's a Cat 5, Cat 4 language. And so you get 63 weeks. If you've got Spanish, which is much easier, you get 26 weeks. So all the white guys get smoked because we've got Mexicans and Puerto Ricans and Cubans in our army, and they know it. So it's a piece of cake for them. For our white guys, not only do you have to learn a new language, but you get less than half the time to learn it. So in all honesty, while Arabic's a more challenging language, I think it was easier to pick up because we had 63 weeks.
I'm sure you got lots of stories. I'm sure we could do a 52-week podcast and all the questions that I have about the military. So let's just fast forward. We'll give you the cliff notes on the rest. Give me the cliff notes on the rest of your journey in the military about like, because didn't you do some office work in DC or Virginia?
Yeah, so I was at the National Security Agency for 3 years and worked with the NSA and the CIA. And then after that, I went out to Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington, and we did a bunch of different things, but that was more combat focused. So we prepped for Afghanistan, went out there, and I was in charge of a low-level voice intercept team, and we did over 100 combat missions in roughly 9 or 10 months, and it was awesome, man. It was the time of my career. And then when I came back, I knew I was getting out. I had about a year and a half, 2 years left, so they put me, there were only 2 guys with my rank who had the combat experience that I had. So they put me in charge of the battalion level combat training for the last year and a half, 2 years I was there.
And was it like that's a contract? Like you work, it was a 10-year contract, or like how does that work? Or every year you can decide like you want to keep going, or like how did you decide like, oh, I'm quitting it whenever you quit? Or retired, I should say.
When you come in, you sign from memory. I think it was a 3 to 6 year contract. And you know, why would you sign a 5 or a 6 year? Because you got a bigger bonus with some jobs. Or some of these guys just, hey, I'm committed. Can I sign a 20 year? They were ready, right? So you can sign a 3 to a 6 year contract. Well, when you get within, I think it's a year of being out, they start re-recruiting you. Hey, do you want to get back in? Here's what we'll offer you. And if you do it, they'll maybe give you a bonus depending upon your job and your rank and everything else. And then you re-up. But once you re-up and you're past the 10-year mark, your only option is to go what's called indefinite. And that means you're staying until at least 20 years. So for me, when I got to that second contract, I knew that if I was going to re-up again, it was forever. And I was to the point where I felt like I did what I wanted to do. I got the discipline I wanted to get. That's why I joined. I had a family with 2 little girls and a wife, and I love them all, and I wanted to spend more time with them. And I said, you know, especially after being in Afghanistan, if I can work 80 hours a week and see them for an hour a day, that's better than being away from them for a year at a time. So I'll take it, and I'll work my butt off, and at least I'll get to see them every day.
Did you know your wife? Were you guys married when you went in, or did you guys meet like at the beginning of that, or like how'd the marriage and the kids, like when those kids popped up while you were probably back home, right? And like, you know, because your kids are like what, 10, 7?
6 and 9.
6 and 9, yeah. I was close. I was close, girls. I was close.
Yeah, you're close. No, that's good.
But yeah, so like you did that whole like thing.
That's pretty good.
You kind of do that whole thing that you see on TV where like, you know, dad goes away, dad comes back, wife and the little girls are like waiting for him, you know, like we're trying to make the best of it. You guys were obviously living on bases together and like doing that type of stuff. And I'm sure that was, again, that's a whole podcast episode in and of itself. That we could have with your wife on the show if she would ever be willing to come on. That would be fun to talk about. So you talked about getting the discipline, right? And 10 years, like, did you have the discipline before the 10 years? You just wanted to really see it through because you're a commitment guy, or like did you really need to be in there the whole 10 years to really get where you were at?
I don't know that I had to be in to get where I'm at, but I will say the later half of my career was where a lot of the bigger challenges came in from a leadership standpoint. It's where I had to learn politics. I had to learn how to work with different personalities, especially in the Army. They outrank you, right? So how do I work with someone who does not want to do what I want to do, and they outrank me, and they've got a conflicting personality? How do I get them to do what I want to do? And how do I get the guys underneath me? Now, obviously, I'm in the Army. I can make them do whatever I want. But if you make people do what you want, you'll literally get what you make them do. You'll get nothing more. You want more. So how do you motivate them to get 100% out of them versus making them give you 60%? And when you start out as a leader, you use the Army's, I got the rank, and you get lit up as a leader, and you see every leader do it, and I get it. So you just kind of watch them, let them do it for a month or two, and then they'll eventually come and say, I'm a horrible leader. What's going on? And then you work with them and you say, listen, you are a leader and you do have the legal right to, make them do what you want. But man, if you can get them to want to do what you want, it's going to be a heck of a lot easier. So just all of that. Could I have gotten out sooner? Sure, I could have, but I picked up a lot of skills in those last couple of years that are helpful.
Those leadership skills. Now, does the Army train you on leadership skills? Or do you have to go out and find your own Tony Robbins and guys like that and do your own research on leadership? Or do they have a whole program for you that's even bigger and better than the gurus that we listen to in the private sector?
I don't think they're bigger and better. But I do think it's way more systematic. So, do we have guys as good as Tony Robbins? No, I don't believe so. But I also believe we've got better systems than probably 95% of companies. So when you get to a company, you've got what's called an NCOPD. It's a non-commissioned officer professional development, right? And you're supposed to do that every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks, whatever it is. So some leader in that organization is going to take that training, and they might teach on first aid or weapons or, man, I almost said PMCS.
We really don't know what that means, do we?
What does it mean? Maintaining your vehicle. How do you ruck? How do you take cover? How do you move and react and communicate?
They got a process for everything.
Everything. And I'll tell you, how I run my business is really closely linked to how a company runs within the Army. You have weekly command and staff meetings, and you've got certain systems. So, people at the lower levels can speak to the people at the upper levels, and it's efficient, and you're not bogging them down, but the communication's getting sent. And you've got standards at all levels, and the standards are highest the higher you go up the pecking order. It doesn't get lower because you're the boss. It gets higher because people will never do more than you do. So if you think you're going to be the one getting off the easiest, you're absolutely wrong. They're going to do what you do or less. So you need to do the most.
So my question about the military, again, because, and I'm a young company, you're a young company, we're building processes while we're going. I'm assuming, when the military, back in 1776, when the United States was formed, I'm sure their processes weren't as dialed in as they are now, right?
Yep.
Because they've been around for 250 years or however long that is. I don't do the math that quick, but would you say that they're over? And again, also the importance, again, we're messing with lives here, right? So it's, it's a little different than roofing and real estate, right? In roofing's even the processes, actually when you're on the roof are even more important because of the safety, the security, and it becomes more important, when you're, trying to figure out how to word this. Do you think there's a good flow between, like, in young companies, can you over process? Like, do you ever worry that you're over processing things because you have that military mindset and a lot of people can't just adapt and handle it all? Or versus, like, you know, like, what's the guideline between, like, too many processes and not enough to actually get activity going? Is that a good way to word that?
Well, you got to remember, I got a different business than yours too, right? You got a bunch of employees, and when you've got employees, they have to do what you say. And so that question becomes more integral. For me, I got 1099 contractors, and they can leave me at any time. So for me, from my perspective, I want to have a process for everything. But whether or not you use it is up to you. But that's part of the coaching process too, right? So when you get a new agent, you'll mention month 1, these are the 3 things you need to focus on. I already know what problems they're going to have. So on month 2, when they come to me, I already know what they're probably going to say their problems are. And then I'm going to introduce them to a process we have to fix that problem. If you introduce them to all the processes on day 1, it's going to overwhelm them. But if you just slowly integrate it, and again, I'm not a company with yeah.
I'm learning that right now. I didn't realize.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah, because I give them. Do you think it's okay to, like, show them the whole map and then say, all right, here's the whole map just so you know where we're going, but here we're only going to work on section 101?
I think it's important
because they all want to know the end. Like, especially sales, especially sales guys, teach me how to close. And I'm like, whoa, we got a lot more work to do before we close deals, man. Like, how about how to ask better questions? Because that'll actually help you close deals, but we got to ask questions first. Oh man, that's good stuff. Good stuff. So let's talk about that year stint when I started seeing those Facebook posts, when you finally decided you were going to be in real estate. Like, how long before you retired from the Army did you and your wife say, hey man, like, Joe Rosen's going to be in the real estate business? And then you started that journey on plotting that out. How long before you retired?
So we made the decision 18 months out, and I kind of split it into 2 areas. The first 6 months was, I wanted to pick an area because I knew if I could pick an area, I could go all in on building relationships, setting appointments, knowing my market, all of that before I even showed up. And it would give me an incredible advantage. I also wanted to set up my business. I wanted to get licensed. I wanted to get my Google Business Review. I wanted to get all of the infrastructure in place before I started talking to people. Because once you start doing the business, you're busy. You don't have time to do all that stuff you wish you'd done. Well, here was the one opportunity I had, and I'd run a real estate business before, so I knew what I needed to do. So I had 6 months to do it. The other 12 months was me realizing that I can't sell houses. I'm not even there to sell houses. So the only real influence I can have is my social media. So I went all in on just building my social media. Read Jab, 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 Right Hook by Gary Vaynerchuk, and that was kind of the basis for that video, or that YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And just really giving. I couldn't take if I wanted to. I wasn't even down there to sell a house, so I couldn't get a commission or sell a house if I wanted to. So it was all just, videos on what to look for at an inspection, what's an appraisal and why do I care, what is escrow money and what's my risk. And I just made video after video after video explaining every question I could think of that a buyer or a seller would have. And it kind of bled into helping agents too, because I started getting agents asking me a bunch of questions based on my buyer-seller videos. So I started making agent videos. And, that kind of set me up down here too for success, just in already having those relationships.
That's awesome. I mean, I watched that unfold, and I'm like, and again, the way I started my business was way different. I was terminated from a company, and I had to go start my company. I didn't have to. I picked this, hey, I'm just going to go do this myself. And I didn't have, the one thing I did do is I did set up the LLC and I did draw the fish logo. Other than that, bro, like, I just started knocking on doors and selling stuff. So it was a completely different process. And that's okay. There's pros and cons to both, right? in your situation, you obviously already had a gig. You're able to work nights and weekends and like, almost like a hobby to like, really talk about real estate. You already knew real estate a little bit from 10 years before. You probably brushed up on a little bit more, right? I'm assuming. Knowing you probably prepped, probably learned, hey, what's new happening. So yeah, and you just gave yourself a leg up, right? Because right now I'm like trying to revamp systems and processes. That's why, you met Rob up here a year ago. He came on board, and we're trying to, build the plane while we're flying it. You built your plane, and then you said, all right, I'm going to get in the cockpit, baby, and we're going to take this thing for a drive. And I want to know how you picked Port St. Lucie, Florida. That's one of my favorite stories. Tell me a little bit about how you picked Port St. Lucie, Florida.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an analytical, right? So I know a lot of people who see me think, that guy's a high D, if you know disc profiles. Oh, yeah. And I am a high D, but a lot of people don't see that I've got a lot of C in me as well. So I asked my wife, what do you want? And she said, I want beach and I want heat. So we looked at, the Gulf portion of Texas. We looked at South Carolina, Florida. I'm going to lose a whole bunch of interest here, but I did not look at the South because I did not want to live in Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia. I just didn't want to. Well, looking at those areas, then we kind of narrowed it down to, okay, what areas have at least 250,000 people within a half an hour driving distance? Because I want a bigger business area. And I want to have decent schools for my girls. And I want it to be relatively safe. And I'm just getting out of the Army. I don't know how quick it's going to be for me to find success. So I'd like to go to an area where I can get, at that time, this was 3 years ago, a decent home for $250,000. Well, that pretty much got rid of Texas because of the schools. And South Carolina, I don't remember if it was schools or what it was, but we were kind of turned off by South Carolina.
Yeah, the school system isn't as good as South Carolina.
Okay, maybe that's what it is. So
at least I don't
we
think.
looked
I'm
here.
probably gonna get a bunch of haters now, but hey,
now you have no roofing jobs in South Carolina.
Yeah, it's okay.
But so we narrowed it down to Port St. Lucie, Jacksonville, Fort Myers, and Tampa. And Fort Myers was expensive. It was nice, but it was expensive, so I got rid of that. Jacksonville looked good from an analytical standpoint, but when I talked to people who were in Florida, they all said, Jacksonville is not Florida. That is the South, and if you don't like the South, you're not going to like it. So that kind of turned me off, and I said, okay, forget Jacksonville. I honestly wanted to go to Tampa or St. Pete, but it ended up being too expensive.
They got an airport. They got an airport right there. That's why.
They do have an airport, yep. And they've got a base over there, so my veteran presence would have been a little bit stronger.
Yeah, you could recruit.
Absolutely, it was pretty, but an average home over there that was $250 in Port St. Lucie was $350 over there. So that's what drew me over here. And I'll be honest with you, I couldn't have made a better decision. I mean, these people I've gelled with so well; they've become family immediately. They welcome me in. I've had incredible experiences, very few negative experiences, and in under 3 years, I feel like a part of the community, man. It's pretty awesome.
I can tell. I mean, I'll never forget, I watched that whole journey, right, unfold, and you documented everything beautifully. And again, because I paid attention, because I'm a marketing guy, so I'm like, man, this guy's marketing himself. Like, what's he doing? Like, how's he doing it? Like, how does he do all the... You seem like you're superhuman. You're marketing, you're in sales, you're running operations. It's like, holy cow, like, who is this guy? I need to meet him. And, but you just introduced me. I was at a roofing conference, I don't know, a month or two ago. And you're like, hey, my friend, is her name Jennifer? I think Jennifer, the roofing girl.
Jennifer, yeah.
You're like, hey, my roofer, she's at the same conference you are. You should go say hi. And I was just like, dude, that Joe Rosen, like, 2-3 years ago, like, we're hustling sports cars. Next thing you know, he's like connecting me with roofers.
Yes.
And I'm like, wow.
She's amazing. She's one of my favorite people.
She is amazing. Yeah. It's just the way the world is getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yep.
As me and you just keep like reaching out to more people, expanding our reach, getting out of our comfort zone. And I have a lot more to talk about. We're going to have to take a break right now because my computer battery's dying and I feel like my internet's ready to blow. But I'm only halfway through this show because I want to get to what you're doing in real estate in Port St. Lucie, Florida. So we'll be back with that. I really appreciate your time, Joe, and looking forward to the next chat.
Sounds good, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah. See, I don't know my battery's at 5%. You kept coming in and out, but the cool thing about this program, can you still hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I can't see you. The cool thing about the program, they're recording on your end with your internet. So all your stuff came through. So I'm wondering how my stuff came through, but we'll see how it is. And I'm going to get you booked here to finish this thing, and we'll deal with it later.
Whatever you need, bud.
Thanks, man. Hell, I got your thank you card too, man. That was really sweet. I can't. You don't mind if I post that, right, and inspire people to send more thank you. Send people that way. More people can send thank you cards because that's really cool.
Isn't it?
Yeah, man. Listen,
it's awesome.
and I told everybody in my office, I said, see, this is what real salespeople do. Real salespeople take the time to write a handwritten thank you card because they care. Not because they have to, but because they care.
Yep. Well, I appreciate you, man.
Bro.
I hope you feel it.
Have a great day. I appreciate everything you do.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Big Fish Cares podcast.